All right, so we're going to look at reflection. This is going to be the next kind of transformation that we're going to look at. With reflection, we should be kind of familiar with that, at least in terms of the real world. Obviously, the easiest example would be a mirror. There's other places you can see reflection, like your phone or you're in a puddle or something like that. But what we do with a reflection, we're going to have what we call basically a mirror line, or the line of reflection, cleverly named. And you're going to basically reflect your figure over that line of reflection. So that line of reflection is basically like the mirror. So let's go and jump into our problems here in example 4. We got A and B right here. So in A, wants us to graph our vertexes A, B, C, and then wants us to reflect it over the line that is described. So I'll go ahead, or you can go ahead and graph those lines. I'll do that really quickly. So there's our triangle that makes ABC right there. So it wants us to reflect it over the line x equals 4. Now this is the most important part of reflections, is getting this line correctly, because it's the easiest place to make a mistake. If you just think about it, x equals 4, when you hear anything with x, you were probably thinking it's going to go horizontal, like we just saw that with our translations. Well, let's think about this x equals 4 and what kind of line it's going to form. So if I take coordinates where x equals 4, so an example that would be like 4, 0, 4, 3, 4, 7. If I plot these points, well, first off, all these points have x equals 4. We just have a different y there. But if I go and plot those points, so here's 4, 0 right there. 4, 3 would be right about there. And then 4, 7 would be right about there. So there's 3 points there, and of course I can go on. But if I connect these points that I have, it's very important to see the kind of line that I have. So originally I thought, oh, if I'm talking about x equals 4, that has to be a vertical line. You're probably thinking somewhere like right here, going across that way. But that's not the case. X equals 4 is actually a vertical line. Because on this line, every single point starts with 4 whatever number at the end. That x is 4 on every single one. So you kind of have to like train your mind backwards, or do some training that when you see x equals 4, that is going to be a vertical line. Likewise, when you see y equals 4, this is going to be horizontal. So we'll kind of look at that one in a second. But with our y equals 4, all of those coordinates are going to have the 4, which is going to give you a horizontal line. Whereas when we have x equals 4 right here, it is vertical. So please make sure that we can kind of pick up on that and see that and understand that, because that is an easy place to make a mistake. From here, everything else should be pretty easy. We're going to reflect it over that line. So we're going to take these coordinates one at a time. So I'm going to start with A. If I look at A, I should see that is basically 2 blocks over. So because that's 2 blocks over on the left, it needs to be 2 blocks over on the right. So I'll count 2 spaces right there, and this is going to be my A prime. Same thing for B. B's over here on the right, 2 spaces. I'm going to go over here to the left, 2 spaces, and get that B prime. And then when I look at C, if I count that, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spots. Count 5 spots over this way, and C prime is going to be right here. So there is our triangle that is reflected over our vertical x equals 4 line. And if you look at it, it does look like that would be reflected. If that was a line of reflection, that would make sense there. Again, like I said, the most important part is this right here, knowing that x equals 4 is vertical. So for B, I want you to try that one on your own. So you kind of already know what line it is. You're going to use the exact same triangle as the one in A, so just copy that triangle down over again, and then go and reflect it, but this time it's going to be over y equals 4. Alright, so this is what we get when we reflect over y equals 4 with those same coordinates that we saw over here in A. So of course we're going to get the exact same thing. If you kind of like turn your paper sideways, it looks very similar to what we just did. But like I said, with our y equals 4, we're going to get a horizontal line. Every single point on this blue line right here is going to have the y equal 4. So like with this spot right here, that's going to be 1, 4. Right there, that's going to be 5, 4. Back over here, that's 9, 4. So make sure we pick up on that. But everything else in terms of reflecting, it should be pretty easy. B's 1 away, 3 away right here for our A. And then right here, we got 5 and 5 for those. All right, let's look at our next example here, example 5. So it gives us 3 coordinates again to make a triangle, but this time it wants us to reflect over the line y equals x. So let's plot these first, and then we'll kind of talk about what line we have here. Okay, so there's our triangle there. Like I said, it wants us to reflect it over the line y equals x. So this is, of course, a little different because, one, we don't have any numbers in it like we saw in A and B. But also, keep an eye on this word line right here. So when we think of line, we did this beginning of the year. We should know that the equation for a line is y equals mx plus b, where that m stands for the slope, rise over run, and b, of course, is your y-intercept. When I take y equals x, that looks very basic, but if you notice, there's a right there, we got x right there. So if I kind of break this down a little bit more, I can assume that there's going to be a 1 in front of that x. That's always been the case. When you had algebra last year, you should have seen stuff like that. And then right here at the end, I can put a plus 0. Now, all of a sudden, this y equals x is now y equals 1x plus 0, where this 1 represents the slope, and this 0 right here represents the y-intercept. So when I look at this or kind of plot this in, I'm starting here at 0, so it's going to be right here at the origin. Slope is 1, so it's 1 over 1. So it's going to be there, and then there, and then there. So, as you'll see, I'm going to try and get this as best we can. But this line right here is going to basically be a diagonal line that goes all the way across. And so instead of having a vertical and horizontal line like we saw in the problem before, this time it's going to be a diagonal line, which is what x equals, or y equals x is. So this may look really confusing and very difficult, like if I look at j, how am I going to figure out, how am I going to reflect it over this line and figure out what j is? This is actually pretty easy. It might honestly be easier than what we just saw in our problem before, because y equals x, that means x has to equal y. So these two coordinates that we have are basically going to swap with each other. So when we go and get the primes of these, all you have to do is just swap the coordinate. So that's going to be 7, 2, that's going to be 3, 1 for k prime, and then L prime lastly is going to be 4, 8. So if I plot these points, we got 7 there, it's going to be right here, so 7, 2. This is going to represent my j prime. I'll look at k prime, which is going to be right here. And then we have L prime, which is going to be up right here. So L prime is going to be there. And then when I draw, I'm going to see my triangle looks about the same size. It's just kind of reflected over again. If you kind of tilt your head a little bit, you can see that. Another thing to kind of see with this, I think, is interesting. If you're kind of hesitant, not knowing if it truly reflected or not, if you look at K is basically a block away right there. Well, it's the same thing on this line over here. When you look at L, I was kind of like 2 away. Well, it's still the same thing here. Then even with this J, it's basically around 3 away from it, or 2.5, depending on where you look at it. But even still, when you kind of do it like that, you can still kind of see the distance or that it is reflected. So we can kind of trust this. But this should be the easiest way. You'll see this on your quizzes and skills checks and stuff like that, and tests, of course. So anytime you see y equals x, you need to it's really easy. Just switch those around. So that will be all for our reflections.